Hey, what's up? It's Adam. Real fast before our show, I wanted to let you know the show's gonna be a little different today. We are gonna do an hour of like our typical show where we run down the TVs, the movies, video games, and whatnot. And then we're doing an hour with our buddy over at the Fight Geek type of like interview thing. So it's still gonna be 2 hours. It's gonna be a ton of fun. Just wanted to give you guys a heads up, okay? And here we go. Welcome, everybody, to We Geek Podcast. Today is Wednesday, November 9th, and it's our 80th episode, and it's going to be a little bit of a short one. We record these a little bit earlier, and we are deep into the season finale of America, and so we got some really super important things to do, so it's going to be a little bit shorter of an episode, but it should be sweet nonetheless. And then next week we're going to have a big one. I know we're going to be both seeing Doctor Strange in the meantime. I've heard nothing but good things, so I can't wait for that, man. How's your week been?
Nuts. We lost another driver at work, so it's just four of us now.
Oh, what happened?
There were some things, and he's no longer employed.
Never mind. I thought the worst. I apologize.
No,
I'm so sorry. No. I'm glad he's okay. But
yeah.
All right. Well, dang, that sucks.
And one driver has a second job, so he can only work 2 shifts a week. So we're scrabbling to try to find more, but trying to find somebody in Statesville without a recent DUI is like finding a needle in a haystack without burning it down first.
Oh, that's crazy. That's crazy, man. Yeah, my week's pretty nuts. I had some friends into town for a few days, so I had a few days off work, and we went to a music festival in town, and
nice.
It was a wild ride. And then the ride's over with now, so it's back to reality. It's kind of depressing. Yeah, but it was fun. It's definitely fun to get let loose, like crazy loose for a few days, and then slowly come back down to reality and look at your bank account and go, oh my God, what am I going to do? So working on that. But other than that, I haven't been doing much except for really playing Skyrim, I want to see Doctor Strange, but yeah, dude, I've been in Skyrim. I've been playing Elder Scrolls Online. I haven't really touched PlayStation since last week, but since I've last talked to you guys, that's what I've been doing. I'm just knee deep in Skyrim. I can't wait for this weekend to come by where I just have a day off, go see Doctor Strange, play some Skyrim, and just relax. But yeah, man, that's what I've been up to.
Nice.
Let's see here. Let's get into the news since we don't have too much time, but we still got some news for you. You want to go ahead and take this first one?
Yeah. This has been a strange week for Fantastic Beasts. And where to find them, because it's not out yet, and we already have some news about the sequel. The report started that Johnny Depp had joined the cast for the sequel, and everybody went, great. And then David Yates kind of outed that he's going to be playing a character named Gellert Grindelwald. And he's kind of briefly mentioned in the HP movies, but they go into a lot of detail in the books. He's kind of like the evil version of Dumbledore, basically. And came up around the same time, and we're also going to get an introduction to a younger Dumbledore in the sequel here. Supposedly, we don't know who's going to play him yet, but it's going to be interesting to see. He was kind of more comparable. A lot of people are like, well, Voldemort's kind of like Hitler in all these things. Grindelwald was kind of a better analog because he rose to power about the same time. It was the idea of like the magic world mirroring the Muggle world kind of thing.
Well, I googled his name, and there's pictures of him in something that looks like Harry Potter.
Yeah, there was his older self appeared as Voldemort was hunting for the Elder Wand. He was like, I don't have it, ha ha ha. He was crazed, he was demented, he was in prison because, he was a war criminal. Okay. And then there were photographs of like a younger version of him.
So we're gonna see the 30 or 40-year-old version of him.
Basically, yeah. Based on the timeline they've said, he's going to be like in his early mid-ish 40s.
Okay.
Give or take.
Yeah, Johnny Depp can play any age anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's crazy. Well, cool. That's awesome.
But so that'll be interesting.
I mean, Johnny Depp. I don't know. Do you think that's going to take away from the film?
It's an interesting idea. I
know this is not popular, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I know this isn't popular. I'm not that big a fan of Johnny Depp. I mean, I haven't been a fan of him for years.
It's a fair argument to make, and it's one that a lot of people are making, and it's largely because his work on Pirates has just kind of been the same. And
well, see, I've always thought he's been the same, and when Pirates happened, I felt like people were suddenly their eyes were open to what I've been seeing for years. When I'm like, he's the same character in every movie. He just went from the Edward Scissorhands type character, just like weird, got a weird hat, blah blah blah, to like now he's drunk and weird, in Pirates, and then that way forward. I love Johnny Depp when he's not a character of Johnny Depp. If that makes sense.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I like it when he's just completely different character, but he hasn't been a different character. He's just been the same thing over and over again. So I don't know. I have a feeling he's going to do that in this, and it might just distract from it.
I don't know. They're going to have to. He can't be Captain Jack Sparrow in this. Like it's not even remotely close to that character. He's got to be evil. He's got to be sinister, but without. There's a fair amount of theatrics because hey, you're an evil wizard. There's going to be a little flair with it, but you can't really go out there with it. And I don't know. I would have rathered it not been him. Right. I don't have a replacement in mind, but this would not have been my first choice.
I just see him doing Sweeney Todd or any of those other movies where he's just dark and weird. I don't know. I like it when he's just completely different character. I don't know. But I'm weird. I'm totally weird. Like I like Blow. Blow, he was a completely different, actor in that. I don't know, character.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. That's where I think he shines. But I don't know. We'll see though. Yeah, we'll see. And I saw that Dumbledore's going to appear.
Yeah, they're going to have because you kind of can't really have one without the other in a sense.
Yeah. But so they're going to set Johnny Depp up as probably like the big villain of the series.
Yeah, so it would appear.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a lot of talent, so hopefully it is good. It is good. So the one I thought was really cool news, American Werewolf in London remake of John Landis' film being written and directed by Max Landis.
It's interesting because of how much he doesn't, like he never talks about his dad or any of his films. And, because it's his dad. It's just
he doesn't like that stigma.
Right. And it's also just because I think he thinks it's weird just because it's a familial thing. It's not... Mm-hmm. And I'm doing a really bad way of explaining this, but it's really just like, it's because he's my dad. Like, why do I, if the movie was good, I'd talk about it, but like, I'm not just going to suddenly bring up, oh, by the way, do you know who my dad is? Like,
right.
But I thought this was interesting. And, who is it? Kirkman and one of the other Walking Dead producers are attached to this as well.
Yeah, no, I'm super interested. I'm usually interested in anything Max does. I don't agree with a lot of his like views on movies and stuff like that, but I do respect it because he comes from a place, I don't know what the word would be, of knowledge. Like he knows so, like he's so, what's the word?
He's got experience for one thing. Like he's actually made movies, so that gives him a little more credence that way, I think.
I guess what I'm trying to say is he is an open book, and I love that. I love that he's completely honest about his process, what he thinks, even if it's unpopular. Like, the stuff he said about Star Wars, I completely disagree with him, but I also see where he's coming from, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah.
There's an understanding there, like, okay, Mary Sue and all that other stuff that he said, it's like, that makes sense. You know, she's suddenly now powerful and there's no explanation, blah, blah, blah. I get that criticism. But at the same time, man, like, I respect the hell out of him because he's so passionate about what he does, and he's just an open book. So yeah, I have him on Snapchat. Every day I'm seeing the stuff he's saying, and it's crazy stuff. But yeah, so it's been kind of cool to follow him the last year or so. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this as well. Have you seen any of Derek Gently?
I haven't yet, no.
Okay. I saw the first episode. It's really good. I like it.
Good. Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah. It's funny. It's quirky. It's weird. You know, it's timey-wimey. It's really good. I like it. But yeah, so looking forward to that. What else do we got here? What's the next one?
Rami Malek from Mr. Robot has been cast as Freddie Mercury in, who is it? Is it the singer that's doing that's directing the Queen biopic?
Well, there you go.
I remember Sacha Baron Cohen was attached to that for a long time.
Yeah, I would have probably preferred him. He's dead on.
Yeah, he is. He is. Raimi, I don't know. Raimi's got the look for it too. Not quite as much. I mean, yeah, Sasha was just a dead ringer. Like, it was kind of spooky. The more you saw them side by side, it was yeah.
Yeah, Raimi, he just seems short. I don't know, for the role. Right? Like, no disrespect, I'm short as well, but he just doesn't seem like he has the same.
Well, they can just put him on Darth Vader's shoulders for the whole thing. It'll be fine.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, I don't know. We'll see. He's a great actor, and who knows? I mean, Bryan Singer. Okay, we'll see him do. We haven't seen him do anything other than X-Men in a while, right? Or superhero stuff.
Right. That kind of, like, he hasn't branched out of that genre much lately.
That's good. That's gonna be interesting. But okay, cool. We got some Dark Tower news. Release date pushed back from February 17th, 2017 to July 28th. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's a big 5-month push.
Yeah, but it's more work they're putting on it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's post work. It's got to be post work.
Yeah.
But hey, as long as it's, we go back to this all the time when there's a delay. Get it right. I'd much rather have it later and right than rushed and crap. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, this year's been so long. This movie's been so long in the making that, I think we're all just happy that it's coming and that it's been shot and all this other stuff. And so, there's just a few more months. I'm okay with it as long as it's good. I forgot the saying. It was about the video games. Like, a rushed game is always bad. But a delayed game has the possibility of being good or something like that. I forget.
Pretty much, yeah.
Something like that. I'm totally wrong with it, but you get my point. Yeah. Go ahead and take the next one.
Yeah, the dude who directed Dope.
Yeah.
See, I got around that. Rick Famuyiwa, I'm going to take a guess at, has bailed on The Flash. And that's 2 now.
That's 2.
Because remember, what was it? Seth Graham Greene was attached at first.
Yep.
And it's the same thing. It's creative differences, which is the most ridiculous. Like, here's a term we're going to. It's I go back to the first Iron Man. It's like, what am I going to tell the press? It was a training exercise. Like, that's right. That's the equivalent. It's like creative differences. It's like, okay.
Oh yeah.
So
it'd be cool to be a fly on that wall.
Right, just to see like what next. They've been talking to, and I don't have his name in front of me. Who is it? The guy? No, wrong movie. I think. That's right. It was Deadpool, the sequel. That's looking at the guy who directed John Wick. The first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No. For sorry, I was kind of jumping stories there. That was my bad.
Oh, okay.
But because I was thinking like, no, I'd seen rumored casting for that, but it was actually for the Deadpool sequel, not for this.
Oh, okay. So you're saying Chad, the director of the
John
first
Wick,
John Wick?
Yeah, is being courted for Deadpool 2.
No, that's perfect.
I like that idea. I think it's good
I
casting.
do. You know, he's not the writer, so as long as the writing's on point and it's funny, okay. The director wise, yeah, that's great. Like John Wick was really well directed. Like every shot looked fantastic. The fighting in it looked fantastic. Like I'm on board with that. That's cool.
Yeah. It kind of
And-
that would kind of hint at a more actiony Deadpool movie, I would
yeah.
think. Like that's if they were saying, "Hey, here's a guy we would want to go with." I would think that
Well,
would mean they're looking for something a little more bang bang.
well, from what I heard on a few podcasts, the director that left was it Tim Miller? Or,
Yeah.
yeah, the creative differences was first about Cable. Ryan Reynolds wanted, or I'm sorry, Tim wanted the guy from Friday Night Lights,
Yeah.
and Ryan Reynolds said, no, that's not the guy. And so that was one big creative difference. The other one was Tim wanted something not completely different, but a different tone. He wanted a bigger, more like, like the X-Men type of films. And Ryan Reynolds was like, no, we want it to be kind of intimate still and smaller. And the reason being is because Ryan has a deal that he will make a certain percentage of the film on how well it does. And if they spend a ton of money on it, obviously he will make less money. So if they do what they did before and spend less money, he's put in place to make a lot of money. And not just for the money and whatever, I actually would prefer still a small, more comedy-focused film. And John Wick is a small film. John Wick is a revenge film. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if they do that with Deadpool, count me in. Just throw Cable in there.
Right.
Who cares? That would be fantastic. It doesn't have to be a globe-trotting film. It doesn't have to be, a bunch of X-Men show up film. Just give me Deadpool, give me Cable, give me, Domino, and a few of the characters that we saw in the first one, his girlfriend and his buddy. That's it. That's all that's all we need.
Yeah. And the
bartender. So,
right.
Yeah. So
here's something interesting that I learned recently. Because we look at box office numbers and everything, we'll take Doctor Strange as an example, and we'll just go domestic because I don't have the foreign number in front of me. Made $85 million this weekend.
Nice.
The movie made $85 million. The studio didn't make $85 million.
Right.
By the end of a movie's run, and I didn't know this, so if this is not news to anybody else, just tune me out for a second. The studio actually splits about 60-40 with the theaters.
Okay.
I didn't know that. By the end of the run, it's weighted differently week to week, but by the end of it, the studio only takes about 60% of that box office total.
Right. So when they go, we didn't make enough money, we didn't make a profit,
right?
And you see, they clearly made more money than it cost, then that's why.
Right. And because the production, the number that they put up for the budget is never the full number, because that does not include advertising. And advertising,
right.
you could make some movies and advertise them for the cost of like the ad campaign for any Marvel or DC movie.
Right.
Basically, it's
and Star Wars, yeah.
And Star Wars, yeah. It's the marketing campaigns alone are 150 million, at least, and to think that a studio is only going to make 60% of whatever the total box office gross is, and to weight that against the production cost of some of these 250 million and another 150, so that's the studio itself has to take in 400 million.
Right.
And then there's the distribution fee, which is what, 35%? And
right.
That's insane. And the interesting thing is, the accounting on that is a little fuzzy, because take something like Disney, where they own Buena Vista, which is the distribution company. Buena Vista still charges that 30 or 35%. So it's kind of paying itself in a way, and they could still kind of claim that they didn't actually take in all that money. It's a bizarre like the finances of it have to all be accounted for and everything, obviously, but it's the public spin they can put on it
Right.
that's why you look at some of these and you're like, how did you not make money? This thing made $600 million. Well, because this.
Right. And I mean, you're absolutely right, and that's why it makes sense to keep the film smaller. With comedies, you don't need to spend the kind of money you would on X-Men or something.
No, and comedies, and horror films too. Like a good solid scary movie does not need giant special effects. Like
Right.
that's so not the point. And those will make money hand over fist. They will. That's why we talk about kind of the death of the mid-budget movie, but comedy and horror are sort of always going to be here. They're always going to be that bet. Something like Bridesmaids, for instance, or what was the big
Hangover.
horror, or Hangover, or what's
you're going to get your whales like that, where
Exactly.
they're just like, whoa,
and then you have the bombs, something like Suicide Squad, which did not make as much money as people think it did. But I mean, that's you take the good with the bad, but
yeah, and I think they know people are going to go see Deadpool 2 no matter what at this point because of how well the first one did.
But
it's going to be. What's up?
I hope that they're not expecting similar numbers, because it's gonna taper for the sequel. It's not gonna crash. It's not gonna tank. It's not gonna be a tremendous drop, but there is gonna be a drop.
I don't know. I think that just like the Hangover 2 and stuff like that, I think that people are. More people went and saw Deadpool than anyone ever thought they would.
This is true.
And now, because it was so good, going into the sequel, obviously they're going to spend a little bit more money to make it. But I think their idea is, let's not go crazy so that we can make a huge profit, because people are going to go see this. Now, if it's terrible, if the movie's just okay, then that's going to be bad. Then the third one, it's going to drop. That's where I think we'll see the drop, because it's riding pretty high right now.
Right. I go to the Iron Man trilogy for something like this. The first one was good, it popped. The second one, not so good, didn't do as well. And then the third one, it kind of surged again. And that seems to be kind of the trilogy model, in a way. And also in terms of quality of filmmaking as well, it seems like. You have exceptions to the Godfather trilogy is a big exception. But most of them, it seems like the first one's good, the second one kind of has sophomoritis, and then the third one is at least on par with the first one, if not better. But I know it's an odd example, it's a weird example, but I mean that's the way I see it usually playing out anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so did you see Yui Boll, director, retires from filmmaking?
And the heavens open and bless the earth with glad tidings.
We might get some good video game movies.
Yeah, right? Because he'll stop making them. I mean, look, there's an argument to be made, much like there is for everybody else who does not make spectacular movies, that it's at least an interesting perspective. It's an awful perspective. They're terrible movies. And even the ones that are enjoyable, there are some, like Postal is an awful movie, but it's kind of enjoyable for that reason. It's not like it's not like the Blood Rain movies, which are just awful, or pick any of the other video game theme movies he's done. They're bad. They're bad movies.
But could an argument be made that he did what Kevin Smith is doing right now, and you have to give him props for that?
On one hand, yes. He's making the movies that I guess he wanted to make. And that's,
he's completely independent. No one gave him money for this.
Yeah, and if that's your thing, then go for it. I have no. That's kind of the other side of that, where it's like, look, these movies were not for me. I don't think they were for anybody, but they had at least an audience of one. And you know what? I applaud the fact that he created, because at least he did something. It may not have worked, nobody may have liked it, but he did it. and that's more than a lot of people can say, and that takes its own set of values and gumption, and it takes a pretty solid backbone to be willing to go out on a limb like that, and I give him full credit for that. I just didn't like his movies, that's all.
Right.
But
right.
I understand that's how a lot of people feel about Kevin Smith films too. So I try not to be too harsh on him, largely because I don't want him to challenge me to a boxing match. But I always thought, that was an interesting idea. A lot of people thought, like, well, that's just a jerk thing to do. Like, oh, you don't like my movies? Well, then let's fight about it. But I was like, you know what? They did it for charity, and if you're gonna put up or shut up, okay. Like, it's a perfectly valid way to do it. You're gonna get creamed because this dude packs a hell of a punch, but like, I like that when they did it, like, the money did go to charities at least. Like, that was a way to do it. Like, look, we know this is a circus. We know this is a spectacle. So, if we can squeeze a little good out of it too, why not?
I think the big problem and the big difference between what he's doing and Kevin Smith's doing, they're doing a lot of the same things, but is that he was taking franchises that already exist that, we could have gotten real shot at films with. Kevin Smith is sort of doing more original projects,
right?
With this filmmaking, and so he's not stepping and ruining anyone's childhood. He's just making stuff where people just don't get. Some people do, some people don't. Where he's like, okay, that game you loved playing all those hours for, I'm going to make a film about it, and it's just not.
Well, but
not good.
I'm, in his defense, was anybody really clamoring for a Blood Rain movie? Really? I mean,
no.
I mean, there's, I can't believe I'm being the voice of reason about this, but like, just because, like, I am not, like, if I see an Uwe Boll film, like, I have the same reaction as I do when I see an M. Night Shyamalan film. Like, it's just like,
I don't think you can compare the two. I like M. Night Shyamalan's films a lot more. His first few films were not that bad. Sixth Sense was fantastic. Signs, I thought, was really good. I even like Unbreakable. I'm not saying they are fantastic blockbusters, but those three to me are watchable, and some are better than others.
Fair
I
enough.
don't think they're anywhere near Uwe Boll status.
I will put The Happening up against Far Cry any day of the week. I will.
I did see The Happening, and I thought that was terrible. But
yeah. And everything since, I'm just like, nope, I want nothing to do with this. Like, it did. It kind of ruined me. Maybe Shyamalan will have a James Franco moment with me someday down the road, but I don't know. I'm not counting on it.
Didn't he just have a film? Oh, have you seen The Visit? The Visit was not that bad.
Which one was The Visit?
The Visit was where the kids visit grandparents, and the grandparents turn out to be fucking nightmare people.
I haven't seen that, but I have heard good things. I think
it's good.
I think that's kind of why I'm just kind of circling it. Like, I'm like I kind of want to see it because I heard it's good, but there's
it's just all you have to do going into it
is
forget that he made it.
True.
And if you're bored one night and you're like, hey, I want to see a scary movie real fast, put it in. It's enjoyable. It is watchable. And there's parts that freak you out because you're like, that's not how grandparents are supposed to act. That is like, and I won't ruin it. It's not ruining anything, but where she's like crawling under the house to get something for grandma and just something runs by. Like, you're just like, what the fuck? They're just crazy. And you're like, I don't know. I liked it. I'll be honest though, I didn't finish it at the end. I had to go and leave to go somewhere. But for what I saw, I did enjoy it.
Nice.
And then I had to return it to Redbox, but yeah. So just to be completely honest, but it was good. We got to take a quick break though. When we get back, we'll get into some TV news. Again, you're listening to We Geek Podcast on the N.FM, and we'll see you guys all in a minute. Welcome back to We Geek Podcast on the N.FM, and let's jump right into the TV news. I want you to take the first one because I know you like this.
Yes. Warner Brothers Animation the other day, speaking of gifts from the heavens, did announce, due to massive fan demand and the fact that their movies suck, they were going to do something good for everybody and give us what we all wanted, and they have begun working on Young Justice Season 3.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, I saw one of a meme. It was like with Obama and
Yeah.
Biden or Obama or something. And it was
Yeah,
like
Biden's telling him, well, you've got time to do one more thing, and he's like, I know what I have to do, and cut to the press release.
yeah, exactly. I thought that was fantastic. So yeah, this is, we heard about rumblings about this not too long ago about Netflix circling the idea of a Young Justice series, and from what I understand, that's what it's going to be on, or they haven't officially announced that.
They haven't officially announced it.
Okay. I would love if they just dropped them all on Netflix one day.
Right? Well, because that was where when the 2 seasons that the show had went up on Netflix, that was when like it found kind of a second home. Like it got a big revival after that. And
and there was news stories all over the place, and Netflix confirmed it. They were paying attention to seeing how well it does, and so that's smart. If Netflix did make some sort of deal with them and was like, "Hey, look, make this, we will pay you and put it on here," perfect, dude. That's the perfect spot for parents with kids, because that's any of my friends that have kids, they turn on Netflix, they turn on kid side of it, and they let their kids go bananas.
Yeah.
And it's perfect for people our age because Netflix is our go-to, and it's easier to do than regular television. I sat down with my mom. I went to my mom's house the other day, and I found it so archaic to pick up the TV remote to find out what was on live television. And I'm like, can't we just watch Netflix or HBO Now or something like that? Because I was like, I want to show you Westworld. I want, there's this new show about Queen Elizabeth on Netflix, and all, we're trying to think of what to watch. And I just felt so archaic to, okay, let's see what's on television, because I just don't do that anymore. So this is what I'm getting at. This is the perfect spot for people our age, which is, let's be honest, the show is for kids, but it's also for our age as well. We are a big demographic for that show.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah. So that's exciting. I've watched most of the episodes. I need to go back and watch some. Some more, because there are some missing.
And I know they were judging performance a lot based on the video game that came out, the late PS1, early PS2 game that came out on PS3, I think.
They're doing what with it?
It was just an awful game. But
I mean, what was the news that you were telling?
Oh, just that they were, I think that was part of like how they were judging interest in it and everything. Like, here's a Young Justice game that takes place between seasons 1 and 2, because there's a big time jump.
Right.
And they were like, here's how we're gonna fill in the gap, and the game was just awful. Oh, it was terrible.
Right.
And so that kind of, I think that had it been a better product, so that it could have been better received, we would have had this news a while ago. Mm-hmm. But I think that they needed time to kind of, let us cleanse our palate from that, and still see like this is still something people want. And so here they are, and I think I hope this is them kind of breaking away from Cartoon Network, because that whole thing, like all at once, it was Young Justice and Green Lantern, and I know there was something else they were working on that just all of a sudden they disappeared. What was the last Batman thing that they were doing? Like, just all of a sudden they just disappeared.
Well, to be fair, that was terrible.
But the point being, like, there was
I agree.
It wasn't like, oh, it was canceled or it's hit the end of a season. Like, it just stopped.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think it's bad that it was put between a terrible Batman cartoon show and a not good Green Lantern show. But it shouldn't have been canceled because those other two shows were not that good.
Well, but I mean, like all 3 of those shows, though, remember, just vanished at the same time.
Just vanished, yeah. And didn't we get some sort of explanation that the toy sales weren't that good?
That was
rumbling.
They talked about that, like they were disappointed at the lack of how well the merchandise did. Because again, cartoons, kids, they want the toys, and kids apparently didn't really want the toys. But the way that all of this kind of went down, I I think that's more on Warner Brothers than it is Cartoon Network, the merchandising side of it. But for all of it to just vanish off of Cartoon Network like that, I don't know. That was always just kind of strange to me. I mean, I know they still have Teen Titans Go, and I think they're working with. I think they're gonna have the new Justice League on Cartoon Network. So
well, you know what? I bet you Adventure Time's merchandise sold a lot more. Even like Rick and Morty. Oh, that's the other thing. If I could butt in real fast and just talk about that for a minute. The girls that came and visited, we went to the music festival with it. They showed me that show, Rick and Morty, and I've seen a few episodes I've seen parts of it before, but I never really got into it. Have you seen Rick and Morty?
No.
It's hysterical.
Okay.
It is way more offensive than I thought it would be. Yeah, it's basically Back to the Future, but with because I thought it was mostly like kind of like a Adventure Time type thing, but no, it's more like Family Guy, where the Rick or whatever, Doc Brown pretty much, is completely drunk and always screwing everything up and killing people and whatever, and Morty's this petrified grandson, and he basically plays Marty McFly, and so and it's just but what's cool is it's a whacked out sci-fi adventure. The creator of it is Dan Harmon, and I saw that when we start to watch it, and I go, oh, Dan Harmon, that guy did Community, and it's so much the pop culture references, and it gets weird where he starts ripping holes in realities, and it's showing 4 different scenes at the same time, all different, and it gets really, really weird in a funny, good way. It takes sci-fi, puts it on its head, and makes it like Family Guy. It's like what if Family Guy started doing Star Trek type stuff and X-Files type stuff, and put all that in the show where they go into interdimensions, and he goes to his car battery, and his car battery is run by a civilization, and he starts talking to them, and they're like, well, we stopped working because we found a universe within our universe, and we got them to do it for us, and then he goes deeper and deeper and deeper. I don't know, I'm going on a tangent, but it is hysterical. It's funny. Maybe it was because I went to a music festival and I might have been a little tipsy when I watched it, but it was perfect.
Yeah, I have a feeling that probably helped. But...
Yes, and it was weird because we go to the music festival and there's all these signs and people wearing the shirts and stuff, and I was like, oh, it's making a little bit more sense now. But it was a cool show. Definitely check it out if you ever get a chance. It's hysterical. But back to what I was saying is that I imagine Cartoon Network, that has to be one of the biggest. Like I said, prime example. Went to the music festival. People were wearing their shirts. They had their totems. It was very prevalent, more than Adventure Time or anything else I've seen.
Wow.
So I see shows like that having such an audience. Shows like that are going to get prominence over something like Young Justice, which is weird. It's odd, but I don't know.
It's one thing to have a very focused, devoted crowd, and it's another thing to just have tremendous mass appeal, even if it's just hey, I like someone to buy a shirt. If 10 million people do that, as opposed to 1 million who are oh my god, I gotta watch a show and buy a shirt, the business model's gonna win out every time.
Oh yeah. You know what I just thought of? The best example of what Rick and Morty is. Futurama is The Simpsons, where Futurama is a space version of Simpsons or whatever,
right.
A sci-fi version of it. This is a sci-fi version of Family Guy, because it's completely offensive. It's not random. It's not like Family Guy random humor. It's not like that. So I guess I shouldn't compare that. The humor is very, very smart in it. Where they freeze time and they do a bunch of things. It's not a bunch of pop culture like Family Guy is. It's just certain scenes where one of the guys has a thing in them, and then they figure out who he is. He pulls the other guy's head down, opens his mouth, and pukes inside of his mouth, and you realize, oh, he's doing the thing from the movie The Thing. That sort of thing. That make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that. So you're like, oh, but if you didn't get it, you still think it's funny. But if you watch The Thing, I was the only one that noticed. I was like, oh, that's from The Thing. No one else around me knew what I was talking about. I was like, that's for the movie The Thing. That's the reference they're doing. They still thought it was funny, but I got the reference. So it was kind of like watching Community in a way, where you're just like, oh, I get it. But yeah. So anyway, let's move on, I guess. Sherlock season 4 premiering January 1st, 2017.
Yeah, cool for Sherlockians. Like
Yeah,
I,
dude,
you know,
friends...
like
oh,
I, like I enjoyed the show, but like I was never, I didn't get on the hype train for it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I did. I enjoyed it. My friends who went and saw Doctor Strange, I haven't seen it yet, and they've seen it. They're like, "What, Adam? You haven't seen it?" I was like, "I know. I had a busy weekend." They absolutely loved it, and these are my friends who don't like all the comic book movies. They liked Deadpool. They liked parts of Civil War. They're very like, I don't know. They're not like us. They loved Doctor Strange. They were like, it is weird. It is something completely different. They compared it to Guardians of the Galaxy, where Guardians of the Galaxy was just very different. It's not your typical stereotypical superhero film. It has its tropes, but they were like, it was just so weird and different from what we've seen before that it made it super interesting. And so I can't wait for it.
Now, are these? Let me stop you for one quick second. Are these people who have or have not? Let me put it this way. Do you need to watch the other Marvel films to get this? Like, Guardians is one that kind of sits by itself in that respect.
No, you don't need to see any of them. They said that, let me put it this way. They said they're just like most people. Most people have seen all the Marvel films. They know what Captain America looks like. They know who Thor is. They know who Spider-Man is. They just don't know their backstory and stuff like that, like we do, or to the amount that we do.
Right.
So they I haven't seen the film, and they didn't want to spoil anything for me, so they didn't say much. They did say it is connected to the Marvel Universe in some big ways.
Okay.
But I'm sure there's a ton of stuff that they didn't catch. These are my friends who sometimes confuse if Batman is DC or Marvel type of stuff.
Fair enough.
So, and which is a lot of people, so it's but they get it. My buddy was just like, they did it again. Like, they somehow, we're still waiting for it to drop out, but Marvel pulled off another one. And one thing they came back with was they were surprised how well Cumberbatch did, and I reminded him, I was like, he was in Star Trek, the second one. He was like, oh yeah, that's right. And I was like, if you like him, you need to go watch Sherlock, because that's really good. Like, he's really well in that. And my buddy went and saw it, watched one of the episodes or something like that, because they're kind of like movies.
Yeah, they're an hour plus at least. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like every episode's kind of like a movie, and he went and watched the first one. He was like, "How did I not know about this?"
Yeah.
It's modern day. It's super smart, and and I told him, I was like, I never liked the one with Robert Downey Jr. because that felt way too popcorn.
Well, it's a Guy Ritchie movie, man. That's what they are.
Exactly. But I never liked that. I didn't like that. I liked the more Sherlock the show is more of a smart man's version of Sherlock Holmes.
Right.
It's where you do have to think a little bit, and there's twists and stuff like that, and it's entertaining. And that's what my friends got away with, because they're like, wow, like, he was really well in it. So I'm curious. I want to go into it and seeing what Marvel puts in it, all the weird stuff. I don't even know who the villain is, because I still can't tell. They show a guy in the trailer, but he just has dark eyes. That's all I know. So I know nothing about the film except for, obviously, they're pulling from the origin story. So
right,
I'm curious if, what's his name, Dormammu or
Dormammu, yeah.
Dormammu, yeah, that's it. I'm curious if he's in it, or like, they mention him, or like Brother Voodoo, or I want to know how deep they get into Doctor Strange.
Well, because Dormammu is like his big bad, like that's his Green Goblin in a sense. Yeah,
exactly. And so I'm wondering if he's in it, they just don't show him in the trailer, that sort of thing, or if maybe that guy is him, but like, whatever, like the human flesh, just talking for him or something. I don't know. So
something like that. That'd be interesting.
Yeah. So I'm and I'm just glad everyone's liking it, because it's just like Guardians. It's the one where it's like, that could be just like Ant-Man. It could be bad, and it sounds bad on paper, but somehow they pull it off.
Yeah, this is the one, like, I've been the most hyped for this in recent memory, and like I get this of like, well then how come you haven't seen it? Well, my girlfriend hasn't seen any Marvel movies, so we're trying to catch up.
Yeah, oh yeah,
and with everything else going on, it's like, oh, we just watched the first Avengers, and it's like, oh, so you're not even halfway. Okay.
Yep, you're about 1/3 the way there.
Just about. It's because there's been 13 so far.
Yeah. So wait, how many have you seen?
5, I think. No, because it's 2 Iron Mans, Thor, Cap, Hulk, Avengers. 6. So 6.
Oh,
so
wow.
we're not quite halfway yet.
Yeah, you're getting there. You're getting there.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break. When we get back, we're gonna finish TV, get into some video games, and get out of here. Again, we will see you guys in a minute. You're listening to We Geek Podcast on the N.FM. See you in a minute. Welcome back to We Geek Podcast on the N.FM, and let's finish up some of the TV news here. We see that Defenders, Simone Missick, which is Missy Knight, Deborah Ann Wool, which is Karen Page, and Elodie Young, which is Elektra, officially added to the cast.
Yeah, Defenders is going to be a stacked series.
Oh, it really is. Now, I always assumed they were going to be in it anyway, so, but that's cool to get the confirmation. So.
Yeah, to see it official, for sure, yeah.
Yep. That's going to be awesome. Supergirl, Harley Quinn Smith joins cast of episode directed by Kevin Smith.
Yeah, it was neat. Like, she Instagrammed a picture of the script that was, how they're all stamped, like, for each cast member. And and she had one, and I was like, well, that's cool. Like, they're really treating Kevin really well up in DC TV land. And to his credit, he has returned the favor and then some, I think.
Give him a Blue Beetle show. Give him something. Now he's got to be doing Arrow, right? That's the last one.
Like, that'll be next, and I think let him introduce onomatopoeia in that. In some way, he has to be able to work him in, because that was his villain. That was his baby. And I mean, he created him in Daredevil, right? No. Yeah, no.
Wait, no,
because that's 2 different.
Yeah.
Right, he had a great Daredevil run though. That's right.
He did.
Yeah.
What I want him to do is the Quiver, where that'd be a great season, start of a season where he literally forgets who he is.
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah, like have Oliver Queen just not remember and stumble around and be crazy and then have to find a few episodes, give him an arc, but that would be cool. Yeah, no, I want him to have his own show. I want him to do Blue Beetle, or something like that, or like a Booster Gold and Blue Beetle, or something wacky and obscure enough that he's not gonna step on any toes.
Yeah.
But do his own thing. Who knows? Who knows what could come from this? So many good things have already.
Yeah, and it's because he's just been him. Like, he's just been himself, and it's helped open a lot of doors, and people have seen, like, if you give him an opportunity, he's not going to screw it up. Like, he respects, especially when it comes to something like this, like, he respects the hell out of the material and the people involved way too much to be like, no, I am the director, I'm going to, no. It's like, look, what can I do that's best for the show? And that's exactly the attitude from director to key grip. That's the attitude you have to have. And I love him for that.
Yeah, no, he's great. We got some Star Trek news. Star Trek Discovery. Brian Fuller quits as showrunner. Will remain as executive producer.
Man, this show is just never going to get off the ground.
No.
Like, it's just having problem after problem after problem.
Yeah.
And it all started when they said it's going to be on CBS All Access, and everybody went, "Oh hell."
Yeah.
And this is what happens.
Yeah, so lame.
Yeah.
I agree. Let's see here. We got some video game news. Nintendo Wii U production ends on November 4th. Now, did it officially end? I thought they came out and said it didn't.
I saw they said it did.
Okay. I thought it was a rumor.
I think it was official. I may be wrong. It may have, but I'm pretty sure what I saw was like, no, it officially ended on November 4th.
Yeah, and see, everything I'm showing is on November 1st, the news came out that production was going to end. But then Nintendo came out and Nintendo says it's not halting production just yet.
Huh.
So if it does, this would not be a surprise to anybody, I don't think, right?
Well, no, I mean, because it's done. It's been done for a long time now.
Yeah. You can buy a Nintendo 3DS right now, XL, for $100. The new one comes out, I think, on Wednesday. It's like some special model, which is actually looks like one of the coolest ones because it's a black Nintendo 3DS XL with the print of Mario and Luigi on the back, all blacked out, and it looks dope. It doesn't look like all the other ones look silly to me, except for like that one, the space one, you know. But anyway, yeah, because Switch presentation to stream on January 12th. So we're going to get more Switch news on January 12th.
Yeah.
Next
and
year.
I imagine that's when we're going to get the date and price and all that.
Honestly, if someone asked me today, should I get a 3DS? The first thing I would say to them is the Switch is coming out. So if you want new games moving forward, wait and hold off for the Switch next year. But for $100 for a 3DS game library that you're not going to be able to play on the Switch.
Well, for a physical library.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how you're going to be able to play 3DS games on a Switch when it doesn't have two screens.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. To me, they unfortunately made those games not really backwards compatible. I imagine you'll be able to play tons of NES games, tons of SNES games, GameCube games, maybe Nintendo 64 if they figure out the controls. Then they'll do what they did with like Zelda and whatnot. I'm sure you're going to be able to play Wind Waker and stuff like that. But the 3DS games with the two screens, I doubt they'll be able to port over.
No, I think right. the 3DS and the Wii U games are probably stuck where they are for the most part.
Right. So for $100, it's honestly not that bad. Especially if you have a kid or something. And the 2DS is even cheaper. I think it's like $50.
I was gonna say it went way down.
Yeah, so $50 to give your kid something like that, that's perfect. Let's see here. We got Tomb Raider, leaked photo display, possible title for next game, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This was on the train.
Yeah, dude was like working on this presentation on the train, and somebody just like snapped a picture of it.
What are you doing?
Oh my god!
What are you doing?
Well, wasn't there another game that had its title leaked like in a similar fashion? Like somebody was like working on a slideshow presentation on the subway or something. I forget what game it was, but I was like, oh my god.
Yeah. What an idiot! Like that guy's fired.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah. Star Wars Battlefront 2 sequel confirmed during conference call to be released fall 2017 to no one's surprise. So,
right. Hey, around the same time as Episode 8. Who knew? Like.
Yep. Here's what I imagine. It's going to have Episode 7, Episode 8, content in it, and I imagine the expansions will have some of that, like maybe some, and I think like towards some Rogue One expansions in it, and I imagine
I'd like to see some Rebels set pieces at least.
Oh, I would. I'd honestly love to see some prequel stuff. I know that's probably unpopular, but man, dude, I'd love to see a Battlefront game with those visuals on Naboo, or some of those planets. Like that would be really cool. Like to have an actual big army game.
Yeah.
With the droids and stuff like that, to switch up the bad guys and the different kind of things you would find on the battlefield. God, that would be awesome.
Totally.
Yeah, those work in a video game. Not so much in a movie, but in a video game, that would be fun as hell.
Yeah.
Or like the big Jedi battles, that would just be so. Or like an entire map where everyone's a Jedi, running around, or what against the droids. But let's see here. We got Kingdom Hearts HD Collection. All of the games coming to PS4 on March 28th, 2017. Now, to be fair, this is Kingdom Hearts 1.5 and 2.5, but not the 2.8 blah 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 bullshit that were like app games and stuff.
Right. It's all of the it's like everything that wasn't a mobile game. So it's one, and it's like the final mix of all of them. It's 1, it's 2, it's Birth by Sleep, it's everything that wasn't like a phone game, basically.
Right, the stuff you should care about, yeah.
Right.
The main series. So that's cool. I wonder if they'll fix the controls because they do not hold up. I tried playing on PlayStation 3 and it completely turned me off.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. We gotta head out soon. There's some other little bit of news. Vine, Twitter shutting it down. The video clip service, in the coming months. So say goodbye to Vine. We had some good Vines out there. Do it for the Vine.
Yeah.
Um, Marvel R.L. Stine announces work on a comic series for Marvel. No details though.
That to me is fascinating. Like, I can't wait for that. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. Now, have you read it? I want to pick up the WWE comics because apparently it's about New Day and like Shield breaking up, and I'm just curious to see what it's like.
Yeah, like that's one of those things that like I want to read it just because. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we gotta get out of here. I'll let you close out today, though.
yeah. Real quick, because this is gonna be a strange episode. You're gonna hear, it's gonna play out, and then the next, when we come back from break, it's gonna play back in again. We broke down this week into 2 1-hour blocks. This first block is your normal show. The second block is an interview I did with a buddy of mine. His name is Michael Moore Jr., no relation, and he's got a YouTube channel called the Fight Geek, and it was something that I've been hearing for a while. A couple people were talking about, you guys mentioned UFC or something, but you don't really talk about it. And I'm like, well, we don't really know a whole lot about it. But this is his big thing. Like, he wants to be an MMA journalist, and he's really getting into into actual journalism and everything. And he was like, hey, this is exposure. It's a platform for him. It may become something else. The cat's meowing. It's it's a whole big thing. But so when the show comes back after the next commercial break, it's gonna be like he and I sat down and had like a little one-on-one. And it's like an intro and more details, and it was fascinating. It was an awesome kind of interview sort of thing, conversation to do, and it was a blast. And we get to add another geek to the We Geek empire that we're slowly not really building, so that's fine. But and you may hear from him again from time to time. UFC 205 is coming up, and it has, it'll be more content for us for a while at least, so that's it's always a plus.
Hell yeah.
And
sounds good, man.
Yep. And our standard everything, our page on Facebook, We Geek Podcast, our group, the show on Twitter at We Geek Podcast. Adam is at Adam Estep. I'm at Logan Witt. Rate us on iTunes. Leave our comments, boost us up a little. Props to the N.FM for we're over a year on this already. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy to think that.
But I think that'll do it. Captain, welcome to a special edition of We Geek Podcast. My name is Logan. Not with me this hour is Adam. We're doing kind of an election week off and on special here. This is the second half of our special limited edition run this week. Wanted to take this opportunity to introduce a buddy of mine. I knew him when I did Brain Bowl back in Bradenton when I lived down in Florida, and we thought with the rise of MMA in particular and UFC in the public consciousness, we'd bring on somebody I knew who had a much better understanding than Adam and I do, and I'm gonna go ahead. His name is Michael Moore Jr., and I'm gonna go ahead and let him introduce himself and welcome him to the show. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing fantastic, Logan. Thank you for having me on. I'm Michael Moore Jr., as you stated. I'm the Fight Geek, and I've been watching the sport since middle school. I'm now 27 years old, so it's been a little bit. Like many people, I grew up fascinated by wrestling, and I was always really interested in boxing as well. And boxing kind of lacked the theatrics that the WWE or the WWF back then, I guess. Had, and when I discovered mixed martial arts, it kind of had everything I loved about both worlds, and I just kind of was drawn to that, and what really fascinated me about it was just all of the things that boxing had that just didn't work in MMA or would work to a lesser degree, and it was just really fascinating discovering that world. I've been training off and on, since around middle school, early high school years. I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy with an obsession of all things combat sports, and I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, I've seen some of your Snapchat stories where I've seen you break these things down. Like I can watch and join in with the rest of the crowd of just like, oh, that worked, that didn't work. But I've seen some of the sheets that you've posted, man. That's an impressive level of analysis.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I refer to myself as the Fight Geek, and the reason I call myself that is because people are always like, Mike, you are such a nerd. And it's funny because I am a geek. That's why I think it's pretty fitting. I'm on this podcast right now. But I geek out about fighting, man. I mean, it really sounds strange to say that, but fighting is just high level problem solving with really, really high stakes. And I love that aspect of it. I really do geek out about it.
Excellent. So what's for someone like me who's probably emblematic of a large chunk of say a standard UFC audience, what are a lot of common misconceptions that you might want to dispel? Like, what do you hear a lot of people say that just really grates on you because it's either not accurate enough, or it's just so wildly off the mark?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are a ton of those. MMA is a sport that is kind of just bred in a time of misconception, or just bred in an environment that has led to misconception about the sport. Obviously, it hasn't been looked on too favorably for a long time, and it's now starting to finally gain ground. It really grinds my gears to hear things like, it has no rules, or just portraying it in this like terribly savage way. It really bothers me to hear things like, oh, they're rolling on top of each other on the ground, that's not fighting, or oh, those kicks wouldn't work on me because for insert whatever random reason that doesn't actually make sense at all. And it really bothers me to think of it in some sort of way that is inherently more violent than many of the other sports that are really commonly accepted in our culture. There have been a fair amount of scientific studies that have looked into the brain trauma in mixed martial arts, comparing it to boxing and football, and the majority of those studies have shown it to be less, if anything. So to portray it in this way that is just 100% more violent than some of the other things that we enjoy in our culture, it bothers me a bit.
Interesting. I had heard the argument made one time that it's actually safer in a sense compared to boxing because of the 10 count rule in boxing.
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, the 10 count rule allows you to recover when in a real fight you would not be able to recover. I mean, it essentially, in the right situation can allow you to almost get completely knocked out and, for your brain to temporarily recover, which is not good because everything they're finding out about, CTE, the chronic traumatic encephalopathy, that the famous, Will Smith concussion movie was all about. What they're finding out about, things like that are that these micro concussions, these micro impacts are really some of the causative agents with long-term brain injury. So yeah, the standing 10 count is, it's a problem.
Yeah. Let me see. Tell me about the differences in some of the promotions. I see the two main ones are what is it, UFC and Bellator?
That's correct.
Okay, and what's the distinction between the two?
Yeah, so, obviously the UFC's been around for a lot longer. It has a much more rich history. If I had to pin it down to one thing, it'd be, I think Bellator is going a little more the WWE route, if that makes sense. They seem to be all about flash and entertainment right now. I don't think they are necessarily looking to put on the most legitimate fights all of the time. And that's not to say there aren't legitimate fights, because there's some great fights in Bellator. On November 19th at Bellator 165 in San Jose, California, they're doing Michael Chandler versus Benson Henderson for the lightweight title. That's going to be a phenomenal fight. But then on the same card, you have Kevin Ferguson Jr., aka Baby Slice, the son of the infamous and late Kimbo Slice, making his pro MMA debut, which I certainly don't have a problem with that. I'm going to absolutely tune in. But, it is a guy that is making his professional debut and is going to be fighting in one of the major MMA organizations. Now, at the same time, we saw recently with CM Punk doing a kind of similar thing in the UFC. So that's not to say that the UFC doesn't do that. And the UFC is leaning more and more towards, these sensational fights rather than, fights that abide strictly by the rankings. But I think we've seen a little bit more of that in Bellator, fights like Ken Shamrock versus Royce Gracie, and they're both, in their damn 50s. It's, a little more flash, maybe a bit less substance.
Right. And it kind of speaks to the kind of the ever-present struggle of business versus integrity, doesn't it?
It can. It depends on what side of the fence you stand on. There's this constant struggle in MMA that I think is actually really coming to a head right now, with the introduction of people like Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey that have really just brought a level of star power that mixed martial arts has never seen before. And I think we're living in the era of what, we refer to as the money fight, where, money matters more than the rankings. And so there's this constant sort of existential struggle in mixed martial arts that's going on right now about where you draw the line between entertainment and sports. Is this something that we're trying to take in the direction of like the NFL, or is this, going to be a WWE type model? And it depends on what you're into and what you look, what your long-term vision of the sport is as to what you're going to consider as the right answer. But that's a big sort of philosophical question that MMA is looking at right now.
Right, and didn't UFC was recently purchased, wasn't it? Do you think that'll have any kind of impact on where this goes?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to have huge impacts. Where those impacts will ultimately lead us, I think, is a question that no one can answer for certain. It was purchased by William Morris Endeavor, IMG. The CEO of the UFC was Lorenzo Fertitta. It's now Ari Emanuel. For those that aren't familiar with Ari Emanuel, you should check out the movie Entourage. That movie is actually about him. It featured Ronda Rousey. And he's played, and his character is actually called Ari Gold in that, and he's every bit as hot-headed and ridiculous as Dana White is, if not more so. But WME is a talent agency. They're the team that actually manages people like Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and Ronda Rousey, as a matter of fact. So, their background is all about creating star power, and I think that the most likely scenario, obviously $4 billion is a hell of an investment, the biggest purchase in all of sports. I think we are likely to see a trend in that direction. I think we're going to get a little more circus and, a little less legitimacy, perhaps.
And does that... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that they've got to make the money back. That's pretty much what it comes down to.
Right. And so do you think that's going to have any impact on any of the non-pay-per-view events? Like I know they do occasionally they do like UFC on FS1 and things like that. Do you think that's going to impact the quality of those matches in some way, shape, or form? And is that going to perhaps influence the mindset of the fighters there?
Perhaps. I think that you are starting to see fighters recognizing this trend and trying to capitalize on it. For instance, Tyron Woodley recently became the UFC welterweight champion of the world. He's actually going to defend that belt at UFC 205 against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. But he just got the belt, and Wonderboy is the clear number one contender, has been just wiping people out in the division. And Wonderboy also doubles as an analyst for FS1. So after the fight, he asked Woodley, "You going to give me my title shot?" And Woodley actually told him no on the spot. He was like, "Nah, I think I'm going to look into fighting GSP or Nick Diaz." And it was like, what? Like GSP's retired and hasn't fought since 2013. So, I mean, granted, you could easily justify him walking back in to a title shot. I mean, he retired as the champ, which has never been done before. So, that is what it is. But Nick Diaz hasn't. He's been even almost less active than GSP. He hasn't even been retired, but with suspensions and whatnot, he's barely fought more than GSP has as of late, and he hasn't won a fight at welterweight since, I can't remember, but at least 2012. I can't remember, whenever the BJ Penn fight happened. That's his last win at welterweight. It's been a long time, but those are the money fights, man. Those are the big names that'll sell pay-per-views. And I think on these fight nights we're more likely to see young prospects, talented up-and-comers, people that are good but don't have the name recognition. I think they're going to start trying to use that avenue to build star power and then capitalize on that in the form of pay-per-view purchases down the road.
So do you think that's going to start taking in a sense, kind of taking the place of prelims, maybe?
I don't know. It's tough to say. I don't think prelims will ever go away, because they've got to. They've got to make an event out of things. They've got to make sure the card is long enough and is going to be able to occupy the venue for a certain period of time. But I think that you could get to a point where fight nights are more the quality of like your average prelim. I don't know. It's tough to say. I don't suspect that will happen, but it's hard to say.
Interesting. You mentioned suspensions earlier, and that seems like it's kind of been the word of the year for one reason or another. Can you talk through maybe some of the bigger name suspensions, even if they've been repealed, and the seeming, to someone like me, it just seemed like this revolving door of like they're in, they're out, they're in, they're out, they're in, they're out, and maybe go over the difference between the classifications of substances, because a lot of these rules and repeals and everything, they get a little fuzzy to me.
Yeah, it's fuzzy to everyone. Yeah, that's a great observation. This is one of the things that is currently in a state of evolution. Mixed martial arts has really, really changed, specifically in the UFC, because of that in the last year or two. So the UFC ended up hiring a third party, USADA, who is basically it's the best in the business when it comes to drug testing. The head of operation for their drug testing is Jeff Nowitzki, who is the guy who nabbed Lance Armstrong. He's basically the reason that Armstrong never failed a drug test, but he's the guy that prosecuted him and basically led to that confession. He also went after Barry Bonds and was unsuccessful. But we're talking about a big name in the anti-doping world, and so they brought them in as a third party, and they basically they now have this 24-hour a day, 365 a year policy where you can get tested at any point in time. It's completely random. Everyone will get randomly tested throughout the course of a year. It is the most extensive drug testing procedure in all of sports, and that includes the Olympics. It is crazy. And whether or not that's a good thing is a matter for debate in itself, because the lack of privacy that these fighters are subjected to in order to catch these cheaters it's actually kind of astounding, especially for what some of them are getting paid. If you're Conor McGregor, hell yeah, bring the people in whenever you're making bank. But for the guys that are making $6,000 a show and $6,000 a win in their first UFC fight, some guy's gonna come knock on my door at 6 a.m. and tell me to pee in a bottle for him. That's getting kind of crazy. But yeah, so we've had all these suspensions because of that. John Jones, obviously, being the most famous one this year. He actually, as of today, he actually just ended up getting suspended for a year. He'll be back, or he'll be able to fight again on July 7th, 2017. Yeah, all these people are getting suspended, and it can be for the most minute substance. Sometimes they have this huge list of banned substances that you can find on their website. It's so hard to keep track of. You basically have to trust nothing that you put in your body without sending it to them to test, or unless you're 100% sure of the ingredients that are going into it. Recreational drugs, as long as they're out of competition, are okay. If you get nabbed for like cocaine and you're 3 months away from your fight, you're not going to get suspended. But the night of the fight, you're going to get a minor suspension, most likely, for that. If you test for something like EPO or steroids or human growth hormone, you're going to get nabbed with a huge suspension, no matter what time it is. So that basically is the difference. In the most blanket way. I'll tell you though, it's incredibly difficult to keep track of.
Interesting, and that always kind of fascinated me, because I keep forgetting about just the sheer volume of fitness products out there, and that to me, because that to me was never a market that I paid any attention to, but seeing where, because I remember hearing something about the list being that ridiculous, and I thought, where do all these things come from? And it's just, it seems like the amount of product testing that they would have to do to determine what is and isn't acceptable would have to be just equally as insane, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in this field, and it would literally take an expert in this field to describe this situation in the most eloquent manner, because it is so insane. To even think about how you go about managing that. But yeah, you have to have a team of people, man. You have to really know what you're putting in your body and keep track of that. I mean, I can tell you, just in my like high school athletic career, and my very minor by comparison martial arts background, I've gotten stuff at GNC that I would probably fail for.
Wow.
It's crazy. I mean, that being said, it's tough to draw the line, because there are clearly instances where people are taking tainted substances, or substances that have something in them that they didn't realize. But probably most of the time, or at least a lot of the time, you're getting these excuses, or these kind of difficult to believe defenses. Like John Jones. He failed for an anti-estrogen, or basically an estrogen blocker, which is generally used when you cycle off of anabolic steroids, in order to mask the effects of the estrogen when you go off them, when you go off cycle. And his defense, which ended up getting him labeled not a cheater by the commission. The USADA was basically like, we believe that you didn't take this on purpose, but you're still getting a year suspension, because that's kind of, that's you still got to get penalized for it. But his defense was, basically that it was a sexual enhancement product, and it's like, I mean, hey, it held up in the arbitration process, but that's about as trustworthy as Anderson Silva's knockoff Cialis, defense that got him suspended for 2 years after he was coming off that horrible leg injury. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know what to think about that.
And it's interesting that you would see these guys who would be held up kind of as the epitome of macho would have to say, oh no, I needed this for enhancement. Like, just that the seeming hypocrisy there always kind of struck me.
Yeah, it is funny. There is an epidemic in the sport right before USADA went into effect, basically. Or roughly. There's a little bit of time in between, but you can kind of see the linear progression from one to the other. But we had testosterone replacement therapy was just all over the sport. Just a couple years ago, and you had to think like, wow, all of these fighters have low T counts. Like, what is up with that? These are the baddest dudes on the planet, man. Like come on, man. Like the UFC heavyweight champion is, going to beat like any other person on the planet in a hand-to-hand combat situation. He has low testosterone, really, but at the same time, one of the things that doctors or scientists have found to cause low testosterone is traumatic brain injury. So it's one of those things, like, I'm kind of making light of it and making fun of it right now, but in some of these cases, it's probably legitimate. In most of them, it absolutely is not, and was a way to get an edge. But in some cases, man, that getting hit in the face, it hurts your brain, and it can really damage your endocrine system. So it's tough to say. It's just another thing where, where do you draw the line?
Right. And do you see any actual combat rules changing? I remember you'll be able to bring this up more than I would. There was I forget the fight, a couple or a few months ago, with the where someone's knee strike almost basically caved his opponent's skull in. Which fight was that?
Yeah, that was Michael Venom Page versus Evangelista Cyborg Santos, male cyborg, not to be confused with the person that everyone accuses Ronda Rousey of ducking, her ex-husband. He got his skull just caved, literally fractured. He had to undergo major surgery. There are going to be some rule changes in the future. There's actually some rule changes going into effect in January. I wish I had them all in front of me, but just off the top of my head, probably the major thing that is going to be changed is there's a big thing right now where you can't kick a downed opponent in the head, and that's great and all. Obviously, that rule is there for a reason. But people really play the game with that. They make it into a very unrealistic situation where they will, be like in a transitionary position where, like, they're standing up against the fence or something, and they'll put their fingertips down on the ground, just touching the ground barely with their fingertips, so that you can't knee them in the face. And it's like, that's not fighting. Like, if you did that in a real fight, like, you would get hurt badly. So there's a rule change going into effect with now it's going to be, you have to have what is it? You have to have I'm trying to remember the exact points of contact, but essentially it's going to make it so that you have to have your palm pressed flat to the ground if you're going to do that. I think you might have to have both palms pressed flat to the ground, or have like both knees down. I can't remember the rule change exactly, but that's going to dramatically change how some fights play out. That's just going to be a really interesting scenario. Also, 10-8 rounds, the criteria for 10-8 rounds being scored is going to change, which is really going to affect how fights are judged, because right now, basically, if you win a round, it's almost always going to be a 10-9 round, but not all rounds are really equal, or at least they shouldn't be. Not every round, if you barely squeak by your opponent in one round, but you destroy your opponent in the other round, that really shouldn't be equal. And in the future, that's gonna happen.
So they're gonna start looking more at a dominant performance being weighted more heavily.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. I'm trying to think. We got a couple minutes left in this first segment, so I don't want to get into anything real deep. But a quick. There was something that kind of confused me a lot. We go back to the suspensions and the banned substances. What was the deal with the Lesnar Hunt match? What was that fight? What was the fallout from that? Because that just seemed like a whirlwind of nobody knows what's going on to me.
Yeah, no one really knows still. Lesnar tested positive for it starts with a C, but it's like, God, I can't remember. If I try to say it, I'm gonna horribly mispronounce it because I'm going off memory. But it's basically it is also an anti-estrogen. It's an estrogen blocker, and he has a defense lined up, and that process is going to play out, but these things are not very transparent until they actually happen. Like the John Jones hearing got postponed so many times, and then this verdict was kind of given really sudden. The way USADA handles its business, I don't know what's going on with that. I personally don't see Lesnar fighting again, so I'm not sure that it's really going to matter other than, I guess if they decided to fine him, but they don't really have any jurisdiction over Lesnar if he doesn't apply for a fight license. Like, I don't know how they're going to collect that. Just because he's getting up there in age and he has a really stable career with the WWE, and he already said it was a one-off. A lot of people were reading into it and thinking, wow, he did really well against Mark Hunt, so maybe he would look to give it another title run, but he's not getting any younger, and this is gonna, this could be a serious setback if he did want to get back into the cage. So I don't know how this is gonna play out.
Interesting. All right. Well, we are gonna take our first break here. Again, you're listening to a very special, the Fight Geek edition of We Geek Podcast, right here on the N.FM, and we'll see you all in a minute. Welcome back to a special co-op podcast of the Fight Geek on We Geek Podcast here on the N.FM. I wanted something that was always interesting to me was kind of the genesis of Bellator. Can you give me a little background, like sort of like a very brief, like Cliff Notes history of it, if you can?
Yeah, definitely. So Bellator's been around for a while. It originally was a tournament format, kind of similar to the old school UFCs, except for it wasn't a single night tournament. It would basically go in seasons. So they would actually have like season 1, and then they'd have like a lightweight tournament and a middleweight tournament or something, and then they'd have season 2, and they'd have more tournaments. And the winner of each tournament would get the next title shot at whoever is the champion of that division. So it actually, the way it started was the most legitimate in a way, because it was 100% merit based. 100%, like far more so than the UFC has ever been, or at least since the UFC's inception or its early days, where it was tournament based. So back then, the president was Bjorn Rebney, who didn't have a great reputation, and that ultimately caused them to look away and acquire Strikeforce's old president, Scott Coker. Scott Coker had worked with the UFC after the UFC absorbed Strikeforce, and had to sign a non-compete clause, but after that expired and they heard he was on the market, they fired Bjorn Rebney and gobbled up Scott Coker real quick, and now he's running the show, and he has taken it in this completely new direction. And it is a Viacom-owned entity, so they have deep pockets. And basically, when the UFC jumped ship from Spike over to Fox, the Fox network, Spike was like, "Man, we built you. We can end you too." And they basically took credit for all the UFC. And Dana White's like, "You didn't build anything, man." Like, what are you talking about? And so Spike said, "Challenge accepted." And Bellator formed, and or really Bellator landed the Spike deal, I should say. They didn't start on Spike. They've been competing ever since, and now Bellator's got the best ratings it's ever had under Scott Coker. So this new direction is at least working in the short term.
Interesting, because I know they used to do a lot of cross promotion with TNA when it was still on Spike, and I think that was the first time that I had heard anything about it, and I didn't know. It was interesting. You said they're ratings have gone up. Are they? I know it's a little presumptuous to say anything is competition for something as mammoth as UFC, but it does kind of there's a bit of a smacking of the old school Monday Night War with this, with WWE and WCW, with WCW being owned by Ted Turner, and you talked about Bellator being Viacom owned and having the deep pockets and anything. Do you think is there a chance that this could develop in that kind of fashion, or is it just going? Is it always going to be like an A team and a B team in a sense?
Yeah, I love that you compared it to the Monday Night Wars, because I mean I don't tend to follow wrestling these days. I mean I'm just I'm too obsessed with combat sports to really follow much of anything else, realistically. But when I was a kid growing up, the Monday Night Wars were the thing, and when I was really, really young, Bill Goldberg was kind of like the MMA fighter to me, I mean, and his whole character is based off MMA. I mean, with the MMA gloves and everything, because he's been a fan of the sport since that time. So it's kind of a throwback that you say that. I don't necessarily think that anyone knows for sure. I don't know that anyone can tell, but I will tell you this, how this whole thing's going to play out, is going to unfold in the next couple of years. And with there's a growing unrest in the UFC. At one end of the spectrum, you have people like Conor McGregor that are just taking home the most massive paydays in MMA history by far. And the UFC is profiting like never before. I mean, the pay-per-views this year are just insane. This is a record-breaking year. But for the people at the bottom of the barrel, there's no fighters union. And that means that these people at the bottom are barely scraping by because the UFC can basically do whatever they want because they have been close to monopoly status, before the rise of Bellator. And with this Reebok deal, which now, doesn't let you wear your own sponsors to the cage. You have to wear this Reebok uniform, which pays you minuscule amounts compared to what most people were raking in, in the past via sponsorships. We're talking about people that had six-figure paydays from sponsorships that are now making like $8,000 per fight in sponsorship money from Reebok, in addition to whatever their purse is. But still, I mean, that's a tremendous difference. And then add in USADA, which is great for cleaning up the sport, but let's face it, it's really inconvenient for fighters. Even if you're not on something, that's just like really inconvenient. And if you are on something, then it's super inconvenient because it could end your career. But so people are looking more and more at this, free agent status, whereas before you would automatically sign anything the UFC offered you. If Dana White walked in and said, "Hey, we got a contract extension for you. How about 4 more fights?" You would sign that thing. No questions asked. Maybe if you had a little leveraging power, you would try and exercise that. But nowadays, people are more and more people are going, "Hey, we've got another option out there. Let's end this contract. Let's fight to the end of this contract. Let's test the market and let's see how this thing plays out." And more and more, you're getting these big free agency signings by Bellator. And I don't know if that's ever gonna end up with it no longer being a and B team type scenario, but definitely something is shifting. At the very top of the UFC, it's better than it has ever been before. But I think more and more we're going to see, these minor stars, these people that can headline fight nights that are really legitimate talents, getting signed to Bellator, and it's going to really be interesting to see how this thing plays out.
Interesting. You mentioned a word in there that I wanted to come back to, and that was union.
Yeah.
Do you ever see that becoming anything close to a reality?
Yeah, I think it's going to happen, man.
Really?
I don't know when, and I don't know how, but just this growing unrest. I mean, it's something I've never seen in MMA before. It's always been talked about, but man, the company sold for $4 billion, and there are people getting paid like $10,000 on some cards. And don't get me wrong, that's not everyone's situation. Some people are very, making bank. Some people are making good money, but it's not anything close to the boxing split. Somebody of Conor McGregor's status, even, in MMA, he's making bank. We don't know how much he's making because the UFC is a private company and we can't see their disclosed purses overall. We just see what they report to the Nevada Athletic Commissions, which is usually a fraction of what their actual pay is, especially in terms of these top performers because they get pay-per-view points, for purchases and stuff. And that kind of stuff will never, ever get disclosed. So we don't know how much Conor's making, but what we do know is it would be significantly higher in boxing if you equate his drawing power and just move him over to boxing and assume that he has the exact same amount of star power there, which is not too far-fetched, he would make a tremendous amount more because the way the purse is being split between the promotion and the fighter is much, much more equal. A lot of times you're seeing closer to things like a 50-50 split. In a lot of major sports, it's closer to a 50-50 split, where in the UFC, we have no idea what the actual split is, but it's probably less than 20% in most people's estimations. So I think that is resulting in disgruntled employees, or not even employees, because that's the best kept secret in all of the UFC, is that these guys are independent contractors. They're not even given employee status. And while they do have things like health insurance, or not really health insurance, fight insurance, medical insurance for when you're in training camp and stuff like that. Well, you do have that. You don't have the benefits of a full-time employee. And I think we're going to see a union pop up, man. I don't know when it's going to happen, but that $4 billion mark has some people's attention, man. It really does.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I knew as soon as you backed on employees, where you were going, because that's been the biggest bone of contention with professional wrestling companies, is they're all quote unquote independent contractors, and that's why I may be on the other side of this in a sense, because anytime there's been union talk on the the more, what's the Survivor Series slogan, the more fantasy warfare side of things,
mm-hmm.
it's been crushed and mercilessly. Now I know it is two different worlds essentially, but just in terms of seeing a weak precedent of sorts, but there's it is a whole other ball game.
Yeah, there are two organizations that are trying to make that happen right now, and I think this is to equate it to something else. I think it's exactly like the whole adjunct professor thing that you see play out in universities right now. This is like the new way to like stifle, what you can do with your employees. It's a really weird thing, but I think you see things like George St. Pierre, for instance. He is a very disgruntled independent contractor right now, that has not been able to come to terms with the UFC, and brought in a big high-powered lawyer to get him out of his contract. All it takes is a few fighters that are willing to speak up for themselves, and one or two big names. It's going to take a GSP, a Ronda Rousey, or a Conor McGregor to lead that charge. If you get Conor McGregor on board, it's going to happen, but that's a big if, because the people at the top are usually the most satisfied, right?
Yeah.
But GSP though, he's pretty disgruntled right now, and that could be a possibility if they don't come to terms eventually. And even some more minor guys like Donald Cowboy Cerrone, he recently said he wouldn't mind being the face of a fighters union. And while he's not nearly, not even close to as popular as any of the aforementioned people, it only takes a handful of people like that, with a minor supporting cast of a little more volume to potentially make that happen. It's not going to be easy, and we've been talking about it for years, and it hasn't happened. So we'll have to see. But I just feel, I don't know, I just feel it. I feel like it's going to come.
Interesting. Yeah,
probably many years from now, though.
Right. These things always take a lot more time than anybody thinks they could. But there was something else I wanted to ask. Overall quality of events, and I know it's going to vary from show to show. Do you see? And let's talk. We'll talk in terms of sport and in terms of entertainment. Who do you think puts on the better cards, UFC or Bellator?
It's for me, it's definitely the UFC, and it's not even close at this point. Bellator has stuff that I enjoy. Like I said, Bellator 165, I'm going to definitely enjoy, even though I probably won't be watching it live because there's a great boxing match, that night that I'll probably be watching instead. Sergey Kovalev versus Andre Ward. But Bellator puts on some good cards, but they've just got a little too much. I don't know. It's just it's a little too theatric for me, and not enough substance to it. I know I've already said that a few times, but it really is the way I feel. I watched Bellator this past weekend, and there was just like bad promos with Tito Ortiz and Chael Sonnen, with Chael Sonnen, telling Tito that his zipper's down, and then Tito telling Chael that he didn't know he was gay. Why was he looking at his crotch? Only he spelled it Crouch, so like crouch, like that sounds like a cool word that I think we should all adopt, for Tito's sake. But it's like, what am I watching, dude? Did Tito really use like a homophobic slur to try and cut a promo right now? Like, what is this? And then we got fights like Kimbo Slice versus Dada 5000 over in Bellator. Don't get me wrong, I love Kimbo. Rest in peace. He was a fighter's fighter, but he was never world class. And Dada 5000 is, I mean, the guy literally like went into cardiac arrest after that fight. That fight should have never happened. Like, those people should not have. Dada should not have gotten a license. I can't believe that he was headlining a card. Or actually, it was the co-main event that was on the Shamrock Gracie card, I believe. Meanwhile, in the UFC, we've got UFC 205 coming up this weekend. This Saturday. It's the best card I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen a lot of great fight cards, but we've got 3 title fights.
Let me go ahead.
It's insane.
Yeah, let me go ahead and jump in there real quick. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
you're fine.
We got take a quick break, and then we'll get into. I wanted to break down the card in the last segment anyway, so that works out perfectly. Cool. But again, you're listening to We Geek Podcast, co-op podcast with the Fight Geek right here on the N.FM, and we'll see you all in a minute. Welcome back to a special co-op edition of We Geek Podcast and the Fight Geek here on the N.FM. And before the break, we talked about UFC 205 coming up. So go ahead, give us the breakdown and any important history we need to know for this card. You seem extra hyped about this one.
Yeah, man. I mean, what's not to love about this card? We got UFC making its much anticipated debut in Madison Square Garden, which holds some of the richest boxing history in the sport. The UFC, professional mixed martial arts, was banned in New York many years ago. And this is the UFC's first time in New York City, and this is big. It's its debut show, its inaugural show, and they're doing it the right way. This is the most stacked card I've ever seen. We've got 3 title fights: Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez at the top of the card. This is Conor McGregor's first fight at lightweight. He's the 145 or featherweight champion. He's going up in weight to take on the lightweight champion at 155 pounds, Eddie Alvarez. And he is attempting to do something that no man has done in UFC history. He's attempting to hold 2 UFC titles at the same time in 2 different weight classes. To try and do that simultaneously has only been attempted once at UFC 94, I want to say. BJ Penn moved up in weight to take on George St. Pierre and failed in his attempt to get that belt. Conor McGregor is going to give it a shot. Eddie Alvarez is someone that people may not know as casuals, but he's an amazing fighter, and that's just going to be an insane matchup.
Excellent, excellent. So that's potential history and more, and anything like that is just more money in McGregor's pocket. It's another chip he can. It's another card he can play and say, oh yeah, remember when I did this. So,
Yeah, I mean, the man already holds, the two highest grossing pay-per-views of all time, the two biggest pay-per-view buys in his two fights against Nate Diaz. This one, it's going to be interesting to see how it does pay-per-view wise. It's going to absolutely kill it. Whether or not it will break the two records McGregor previously owns is really the only question. And the craziest thing is, McGregor sells out any pay-per-view that he's going to be on, but this card is stacked. I mean, we've got two other title fights that no one's even talking about. We got Tyron Woodley making his first title defense against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Woodley has a bomb of a right hand, and Stephen Thompson is arguably the best striker in all of MMA right now, at least as a karateka. He really embraces that style in a way that we haven't seen before. He's just been running through the division and has been on an absolute tear. And then, one fight down from that, we have Joanna Jędrzejczyk defending the 115 strawweight title against Karolina Kowalkiewicz, two of Poland's finest, both undefeated, both striking practitioners. If Stephen Wonderboy Thompson or Conor McGregor aren't the two best strikers in MMA, it might be Joanna. I mean, they're all up there. They're just absolutely elite strikers. Joanna is a multiple time Muay Thai champion, and that fight is just going to be insane.
Excellent. Always good to get a better breakdown than just, oh, this looks good. Like that's how I know most of my discussions go. Talk to me about the undercard. What jumps out at you? What are you really looking forward to there?
Yeah, so just on the rest of the main card, we have a few more fights. So this card, it's going to start at the usual 10 p.m. Time for Eastern Time Zone, but it's going to be the time slot is going to be extended for an hour. So we actually have 6 fights on the main card. They had to do that. They had to extend the time slot because 3 title fights means 3 5-round fights. So if they actually all go the 5 rounds, it's going to really drag out. So they had to extend the time slot. We have Chris Weidman taking on Yoel Romero. Chris Weidman is the former champion. He's the man to dethrone Anderson Silva back when Anderson Silva was a god. Yoel Romero is an Olympic silver medalist wrestler, and he is just a freak of nature. The guy's built like Adonis. He's just crazy impressive. Just this hulkish Cuban monster of a man, and that fight's going to be amazing. Weidman was actually one of the main sort of avenues, or one of the best ambassadors for New York. He's one of the guys that really helped it come to fruition from a fighter's perspective. Then we got Kelvin Gastelum taking on a guy we were talking about earlier, Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Cerrone's been on a tear at welterweight. This is a new division for him, and he's just looked spectacular. And if you've never seen Cowboy fight, he is the show. I mean, he is just balls to the walls, does whatever he wants, says whatever he wants, and really comes to scrap every single time. He's always going to put on a fight and a performance that you can respect and love. So that's going to be amazing. And then, the first fight on the main card is the former champion Miesha Tate fighting Raquel Pennington. Come on, Miesha Tate, who had an amazing fight series with Ronda Rousey, in which she dropped 2 fights to her. Miesha Tate, the person who dethroned Holly Holm after Holm was coming off that incredible knockout victory against Ronda. That's the first fight on the main card. I mean, it's just incredible, and the prelims are almost as good. I mean, it's crazy.
I always love when. You've got to love when they have to bring something. Any show you always have to have, you have to draw. That's business. But for something like the first show at the Garden, it had to be huge. It has to be spectacular. And so that's definitely going to be something where if you see every once in a while there are some shows where it does just kind of seem boring, and not just in the sense of from not understanding the sport, although maybe that is a little part of it. But there are some times where the matches are just, for whatever reason, it never seems like it takes off. It never seems engaging like it should be. I mean, it's a fight. They should be interesting kind of by default, shouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that. That does happen, and even when you have amazing matchups, sometimes that still happens anyways. It's tough to say. Like UFC 200, for instance, was amazingly stacked. Was arguably, the best card of all time on paper. Before 205, I think 205 definitely trumps that for sure. But 200 was amazing on paper. And, I didn't dislike the event by any means, but it really didn't live up to the hype in my eyes at all. I enjoyed it. It was a momentous occasion for MMA. But sometimes styles make fights, and sometimes they don't end up the way you think they will. No matter how much that's just the way it is sometimes. Sometimes you think it's going to be a great fight, and it doesn't end up being that way. But this card is, so promising. On the undercard, we've got Frankie Edgar taking on Jeremy Stevens. Frankie Edgar is the former lightweight champion. He just fought Jose Aldo for the 145 interim title and lost. But we're talking about a former champion. Rashad Evans, another former champion, taking on a Green Beret and top middleweight Tim Kennedy. And then you asked me earlier what fight stands out to me on the undercard. Without a doubt, it's Khabib Nurmagomedov taking on Michael Johnson. Khabib Nurmagomedov is the number one contender at lightweight. In the UFC lightweight rankings, you have the champion Eddie Alvarez, and then the number one ranked is Khabib. And Khabib is 21-0, I believe, which is unheard of. That does not happen in MMA almost ever. He's just had this incredible start to his career. Has had 6 straight UFC victories and has won 21 overall in his MMA career. He is from Dagestan, and he's most famous perhaps for wrestling a bear when he was a child. There's actually video of that online for any listeners out there that don't believe me. Check it out. Fun times. But and that's what Khabib does to every single one of his opponents. He is a sambo master, and he just takes you down, ragdolls you. You want to talk about, wrestling, like WWE, Brock Lesnar and Suplex City. Dude, Suplex City is where Khabib will take you every single time. The guy is just a monster. If he wins, most people, or at least I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people consider him to actually be the best lightweight on the planet, perhaps even more so than Eddie Alvarez. The thing that has stopped him from taking the title has been injuries. He trains so intensely that his body just can't handle it sometimes, and he keeps having to pull from fights. But if he beats Michael Johnson, he's going to get a title shot. And you want to look at arguably the worst possible matchup for Conor McGregor in the UFC, within like the 2 main weight classes that he, is looking to target. Khabib might be the very worst matchup for him. That guy is going to try and take him down and just strangle him. And, I don't know if Conor can handle that. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that whole drama unfolds. As on the prelims, we could be seeing the guy who's going to take on the winner of Conor McGregor and Eddie Alvarez.
Nice. Always something to look out for. Well, that's pretty much going to wrap it up here. Again, you know where to find us. We Geek Podcast, Facebook, Twitter. I'm on Twitter at @TheLoganWitt. The show is at We Geek Podcast. Adam is at Adam Estep. And I'm going to give Mike a second here to plug your Twitter. And you also have a YouTube channel, correct?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter and YouTube at the Fight Geek. And that's where I put out most of my content. Usually I share whatever articles I'm working on Twitter, and I do a bunch of breakdowns and analyses that are very, very in depth on YouTube. So if you'd like to check them out, yeah, the Fight Geek.
Excellent. Make sure you check Mike out. The depth of the analysis is impressive, and we hope that this becomes a more frequent thing as things go on. We may grab you after 205 for some recap, if that sounds good to you. Absolutely, I'd be happy to be back anytime. All right, excellent. And we sign off every show with a quick captain. So if That sounds pretty good to you, Mike. Everyone out there, you've been listening to us on the N.FM. Thank you for joining us. And Captain.
Captain.